Okay, welcome to another session of how to do calligraphy with highlighters, but you can use whatever pen you so desire. And today our script is going to be Copperplate. So for all of you new people, calligraphy is not so much about writing, so to speak, as it is about building letters. So we don't have that many continuous shapes this time, but the one that we're going to be using the most is this. So it's going to be a line starting from the upper right, going down left, and curling up in a curl. But get yourself comfortable with that because we're going to be doing it a lot. So Copperplate is actually a rather fun script. It's very close to our modern cursive, and you'll be able to tell that if you are versed with modern cursive. But it originated roughly in France in the 17th century. So around 1650, French officials were complaining that people's handwriting was so awful that they could not actually read it. So they set up a number of just standardized scripts. And those, we will get into some of those later, but across the channel in England, they were doing similar things. So this Copperplate is one of those standardized scripts that people were supposed to use because no one could read other people's handwriting, much like today. So we're just going to go straight into it, and we are going to start with the A. So we're going to use this line that we have just hopefully gotten very used to using. And we are going to, starting from the top, go down and around. And then from this top line, we are going to go straight down and hook off to the right. Okay, and that is your solid basis for an A. And then we are going to do a curl, which will give us the line across, only fancier because this is a very fancy script. So there we are. And that is our A. And then the lowercase a, because it is very akin to cursive, and a lot of the lowercase letters actually are supposed to connect to each other. We're going to start with a line down, and then we're going to curl around for the actual curl of the A. And then from the top, we are going to go down and cross. That is a terrible A. So, and that's a bit better, but lesser line. There we go, proper A. But that is our A. And it's, as you can tell, very similar to what we are probably used to with more modern lettering. So at least it's very recognizable. The B, we're going to start off with that same line that we did here. So I'm going to go straight into it. And then, so the B is interesting, where the entirety of the other line is one continuous thing. So we're going to start up here, and then we're going to curl around down into a loop, and then down again in the second part of the letter. So it's almost like a 3, but wider and with that line through it. This does not have to attach to the first line that you did, but it can, and it's pretty either way. The lowercase b, if you know cursive, you will recognize it immediately. It is the same lowercase b that you would use in cursive, and if you have wanted to learn cursive, this is what your b is going to look like. So we are going to start at the bottom part of that curve. So we're going to start, and we're going to go up in the curve, and then we are going to go almost straight down, curl off to the right, in a loop and then have that little line dangling off so you could connect the letters. So like if you were doing a lowercase thing, V and A. And this is backwards and upside down, so you will, it's not the best, but that is roughly how you would connect them for writing. And the C is, it is a giant curve. You will see that. So we're going to start with the top part of this letter. We're going to go around and then up and in the middle. So curl and then loop, up, and curve inside. Super easy. Very nice. And then the lowercase c is very akin to the C's that we are used to in day-to-day language. So we're going to start with just a tail, so it could connect to letters, and then go up. Nice and easy. Okay. And the D, you will notice, is very similar, has a very similar line set up to like the A and the B. But instead of just going down and curling off to the side, we are going to curl internally, and then we are going to go all the way up and around in that curl. The D is a singular line, which is a bit weird for normal calligraphy. But by this point, I think they had actually gotten a more standard pen and ink. So, as I said, we are going to start with that same curving line. Then we're going to make a loop, circle around, and curl in. So nice and turned out pretty good. And that is your standard uppercase D. Your lowercase d, we are actually going to start backwards, and we are going to start with that line straight down and hooking off to the right. So straight down and hook. And then we can do the curve of the actual bulb of the D. So, and that's it. Nice and easy. E looks like it should be complicated, and so does F, but we'll get to that in a second. But E it's very similar to your cursive E. And like the D, it is one continuous line, hybrid. But we are going to start with this curve, and then we're going to go and loop up, and then do a little loop, and just end with the tail, much like we did with the C. So it's like a C with a little extra curl inside of it. So starting on top, we're going to loop, loop, and then internal twirl. Super fun, right? And then the lowercase e is basically your lowercase cursive e and is very similar to what you're probably used to doing with just normal penmanship. So just straight up, it's an E. You know it, you recognize it, you are very confident with it, because I'm sure you've had to do a lot of E's when you are writing things for everything in your life. So that is an E. And then the F, you guys can see my cat here. The F looks like it's complicated, but I promise you it is not. So the F, we're going to start off with that same curving line that we used for the B and the A and everything. And we're going to just do that. That is our base form of the F. And then, because the F is a fancy person, or the F is a fancy letter, we are going to give it a hat. So starting from the top of this line, we are going to connect and go down and curl. So straight out and curl. And then in the center of the letter, you're going to go straight across and then down. A little ribbon, just a little ribbon in the center of it. And then at the tail, at the end of the ribbon that we started at, we're going to curve down. And that is how we get our very fancy F to look like a very fancy F. It is not difficult. It is, well, I think it's not difficult, but it's very easy to actually piece it together to form the completed letter. And then the lowercase f, again, if you are familiar with cursive, this will be standard fare for you and you will already know it. And the hard part is going to be keeping your pen steady and in the same position. So I'm going to loop up, down, and then up as well. So for all of you people wanting to learn how to do normal cursive, this is your standard letter as well. So you are totally good there. And then we are going to move on to the G, which looks like it could be complicated, but it is not actually complicated. Smooth the paper so you can see. So the G, we are going to start off in the same way that we did with the C. So we're going to start with that curl and we're going to go around. And instead of ending in a curl, we're just going to leave that line hanging. So we are curl, curve down, end. Just leave it there because that's what we need for the G. And then that line that we used, that standard line that is the basis of this entire script, we are going to use it again, except we are going to make it longer and we are going to have it drag down. My birds are very excited that I am doing this apparently. So we are going to start up here around the midpoint of the G and then just go down and curl. And there you have an uppercase G. That is a very nice uppercase G. And the lowercase g, we are actually going to start with the curve. Like little curl that is our standard format for a number of letters. And then we are going to do a curving line down that will loop across. So down and then loop. And that is our G. And next we are going to move on to the H, which you might be able to guess is one of our more finicky letters. It is a multi-part letter and it's probably one of the harder ones, but just because this is in its own right a slightly finicky script where distance between the letter pieces matters. So you want a decent distance between the H pieces, but you don't necessarily want like too much of it because then your letter will look too wide and most of your proportions will be thrown off. But we're going to try this anyway. So we're going to start with that same line, that same basic line that we've used on roughly half of our letters thus far. And we're just going to go for it. If my pen will work. So we have our line. This is our basic slightly curving line and it is good. And then the H is very fancy, so it gets a feather. So just attach a little curly to the top of it and that is it. And then you can take your pen over here because we are not using traditional calligraphy pens to do this. If you are going to use a traditional calligraphy pen, you can only really go down and off to the side. You cannot go straight up. The pen does not work that way, so it just doesn't work. So we are going to start with the end curl, and then we are going to go up and around and down, which is a lot, but it's doable. So starting with that, and then up and around and down. And there we are. That is our curl for the H. And this little line is not a mistake on my reference sheet. I did actually find it. If you do not desire having it there, you don't need to. I honestly thought it added character. So to do that, just bring your pen straight down through the middle of the H. Nice and easy. And then should have enough room for the lowercase h. It is also a standard calligraphy or cursive lowercase h. So you're going to go like you did with the F, up in a curve, and then you're going to just have the loop of the H and let it go off to the side. Okay. And the I looks like it should be complicated, but it's not. The only trick with the I is I's in a lot of these scripts are a little bit smaller or the same size as most of your standard letters. So, and that will distinguish it between the I and the J, because the J's are usually a lot longer than your standard letters to distinguish it from the I. And we'll come back to this with the T, but the I and the T are very similar. So we're going to start with the I, because I don't want to get too far ahead of everything, with that standard line that we've practiced and gotten used to. So we're going to go just curvingly down and end in a curl. Nice and easy. And then the I isn't very fancy, but it is a little fancy. It's following some of the fashion trends. So we are going to just curve off to the side in a little loop. And it's not standard, but if you really want to make it, you know, less confusing between the T, you can always just add a dot on top. It's not standard, like I said, but you can do it nice and easy. And then the lowercase I, you go up with your connector line and then go down and curve off to the side. And this lowercase I does get the dot, so nice and easy. And you will notice what I said about the I and the J being very similar. So the J, because it really does not want to be mistaken for the I, and it is fashionable, but not as fashionable as like the F, who is the epitome of fashion. But it is very fancy. So we are going to do that same line, except we are going to elongate it a lot more, and then we're going to curve up and into an actual curl. So starting from the top, go down. The J's are also very thin. Down, around, and this ends in the actual center of your loop. So, and then it too will get that cute little feather. But that is your uppercase J. And you will notice that I have made the actual line of it longer than the I. You can make it even longer than that still. The lowercase j is, again, a fairly standard cursive J. So if you're trying to learn cursive, this is your J letter. And you will, in the same way as the I, you will go up. You just go a bit up a bit further than the I. And you will go down further and then loop around and trail off to that end for the connection to the next letter, or for a lovely flourish for the end of the letter. And then it too gets our traditional dot on top. I'm going to move my microphone line because it's keeps getting caught and it's annoying. The K also looks like it should be complicated, but it is not very. So we're going to start with our standard line and just go straight down and loop around. Well, not straight down, but like slightly curvingly down and looping around. And then the K as well gets a feather, but it has turned the feather around. So it's like the H feather as opposed to like the feathered hat of the I and the J. So it's a nice little curl that mimics the curl on the bottom. Nice and easy. And then the hard part of the K is that the second part is a continual line. So we're going to start up and we're going to curve downward, do a little loop like we did for the B, and then curve off in the tail. So down, loop, curl. And you can, that is a very large loop on my part. You do not have to have a loop that big, and it should technically connect because I am silly. So that's a slightly better K. But yeah, so curve, down, and loop off to the side. And then the lowercase k, I'm going to get it very close so I can avoid my line of the G. We're going to do that same sort of line that we started off with the H and the F, except we're just going to go straight down and we're going to leave it. So curve and then straight down. And then the K is different because it gets a little hook just on top. Lovely little hook. And then it gets, connecting to that little hook, it will get the tail. So from that hook, tail, which is awesome. And then the uppercase L is exactly the same as the cursive uppercase L, for those of you versed in it. It just has like a little extra curly Q on the end to give it that extra flourish. So curl, it goes up. It's also a continuous line, down, and then curving up again. So hooky curl, up in a loop, down in a loop, and then curling up. Very pretty, very simple and elegant. The L is ahead in fashion, and it's not even trying, nor does it want to try. The lowercase l sort of looks like a very long E. It is also a standard L for cursive. You can see exactly how much of this kind of script that they took for modern equivalents, which makes it easy to incorporate it into your own writing if you really like a particular letter. So you're just going to do a little loop, and then we're going to go down a bit and then curl up at the end. So really nice and easy, very simple. And then we get to one of my least favorite letters of this alphabet, which is actually the M. And why is it my least favorite? Because honestly, it's much like the H, the spacing is very important with this. So you want a certain distance in it, but if you have it too distant, then it won't look right. And if you don't have it distant enough, it won't look right. And it's just something to be careful with. So we are going to start with that same line that we have gotten very used to with half of the other letters, and we're just going to go curling up. So starting with that, and that is our very first letter. And then we are going to go down and curving vaguely inward towards this line. And then we are going to end a little bit farther out than that point. So, and that is our second line, which is nice. Then we are going to skip this line for the moment because we are going to come back to it, but we want this line first. So, but an equivalent amount away from there. I know that makes no sense, and I am sorry, but there's, you want a distance away, but you don't want it too far away. I told you it's a very finicky letter. You will go straight down and hook off to the side. So straight down and hook. And this hook is not going to be as intense as this one. It does not actually have to curl, and it is actually very capable, if you wanted to, of attaching another letter to it. The M is one of those letters. And then from the top of this hook, we are going to go diagonally down and connect. And you will notice that even my M is a little bit wider than that, and it just looks sort of weird. It's acceptable, and it is a passable M, but you can tell that it is not like your standard M. And then the lowercase m is also a fairly standard cursive lowercase m, with a slight exception in that you are allowed to pick up your pen. Because like I said, you could not actually go up with the traditional calligraphy nibs. So you would have to, if you were doing this letter, go down and then return to the top of the letter and do little sort of humps and then trail off at the end. So that is your M. Fold my paper again so you can continue to see what we're doing for the letters. It's very important that you see what's going on. And we're going to go to the N, which has a lot of the same problems as the M with distancing. So it's not bad, it's just one of those things that you have to get used to with the script. Where we are going to start with our standard line, and we're going to go down and curl, or slightly curvingly down and curl. And that is our standard line. And then from the top of this line, which is the middle line, is actually the hard part. So we are going to go curvingly down and end in a point. So it almost looks like an extra curvy A compared to what we would normally think of as an N until we add the third line. And I will recommend starting at the top because, again, it's very hard to go down, and then it curves down to meet the point of the N that we have just made. So nice, and that one turned out really well, but if you don't get the spacing right, then do not feel bad. The N and the M were my personal arch nemesis when I was practicing the script. And then the lowercase n, in the same way that the lowercase m existed, I'm just going to do it over here. Like a backwards person. Down, and then that little hump and the curl off to the edge. So very simple, very what we're used to for an N, and as you will notice, very similar to our standard cursive Ns that exist in today's society. What little remains of in today's society. Anyway, the O. So the O, like some of the other letters, is a continuous line. So we're just going to start up the top and then curl down and then curve inward, like a strange spiral that decided to give up partway. So starting at the top, curling down, and it's not supposed to connect, which is weird, but just curling inward. Very nice. And then the lowercase o, we are going to just sort of draw a circle and then hook off to the side. And if you were conjoining a letter, like say we were writing no, that would be how you would write it. Just join the lower curved letter somewhere in the O and you are good. And then we are going to go to the P, which also looks like it's complicated, but is not complicated in the slightest. So we are going to do our standard line that we have gotten very used to, that we started the A with. We're just going to go down and curve up. And then while we are doing this, we are going to do a continuous line where we are going to start with the edge of this curl and go up, around, and then curl into the letter. And that curl should end within the letter, and these two do not have to touch. They probably should not touch. So starting with the curl and then up, down, and in. And that is a very poor P. It should have gone out further, but you do get the general gist of it. I apologize. My pride will not let me rest with bad P, but that is a much better P. And you get that full weight and everything. I'm crazy, don't mind me. And then the lowercase p, you are going to start with that straight line down, or that line sort of diagonally down, with a little hook on top, so you can connect to the previous letter. So hook, line diagonally down. But unlike your traditional cursive P's, you will have to lift up your pen because you're not going back up. You are just, or going back, looping back up. You're going to start at the top of the letter and then curve down and hook out. The P is also a little weird in that the curve downward does not actually connect to the line of the P. So that is a thing. And the Q, one of my students has actually referred to this as a Q2. It is a almost traditional cursive Q, which does in fact look like A2. And the only real difference is that it has that extra curl inside on the top, and then it gets the curly Q at the bottom. So much like you were actually writing A2, you will start with the curl and then go down, loop, have an extra loop, and then trail off to the side. So it's just extra fancy, but it is easy. And then the lowercase q, much like the lowercase g, we're going to start off with our tail to the previous letter and curve up to get the curl of the letter. And then we are going to go curvingly down, connect up, and then loop out. So curvingly down, up, loop out. And that is your lowercase q. Your R is not the most fancy R that we have ever done, but it is an R and it is instantly recognizable as an R. So we're going to start with our standard line, our first line that we have ever done for the script. And we're just going to go and curl. And then in the same way we did the B, we're going to curl around and do a little loop. Only instead of curving back inward for a loop, we're going to end it in a tail. That is a terrible R, but the same premise actually applies. So I do apologize. My pride will not actually let me have a bad R on these videos, or a bad any letter on these videos. You've probably been able to tell. Okay, that is probably the best I'm going to be able to do right now. But you will also notice that it goes up and then it basically goes straight down and curls out. It's a very lackluster tail as such things go, but and if you wanted to make it fancier, you probably could, but that is the base standard for the writing. And then the lowercase r, you will definitely recognize if you've done cursive, because it is your standard lowercase r. And for those of you who have never done cursive, it's okay. We were all confused at one point. So you will go up into a sort of point and then curl down. And then you are going to curl off to the side in a line that would connect to your next letter. And we are going to change pieces of paper because I'm very quickly running out of room. And room is important. We still have a couple letters left to go. But our next letter is the S, which you will note does not look like a very normal S, but it is the standard S for this. So you will start at the top and do a curl, and then it's almost like we're just adding a curl to our standard line, which it basically is. So we are going to start at the top, do a curl, and then do a curving line off to the side, which is our S. Don't ask me why the S is like that, but that is why the S is like that. And then the lowercase s, for those of you who have done cursive, you will be intimately familiar with this. It is a line upward, and then we are going to curve down in an almost teardrop shape, and then curve out to connect to our next letter. and that is our S. And I told you once upon a time with the I that the I and the T are very similar, and they are very similar. So, but there are a couple differences. So the T, we are going to do our standard curling line, but we are going to extend the curve. Pardon. Let me get a drink. Dry throat. Sorry. So we are going to do our standard line, and then we are going to curl out a little bit farther than we would for some of the other letters. You notice that most of our letters have a very tight curl. The T has a very long curl to help distinguish it. So we are going to, again, start at the top, going down, and then extra curl, much extra curl. And then the T also gets a very tall or a very broad hat. The T is trying very hard to get the biggest hat it possibly can to distinguish it from the I. So where the I would actually just curve just down a little bit, the T gets an extra curve down and then around past that line. So once you have that line, your top line should extend at least a little bit beyond it to help distinguish it. And that is your T, which if I do an I right next to it, and that is your I. So again, they're very similar, which is why I've made such a big deal about the distinguishing marks for the T. But that is it. And again, if you really want to and you think you're going to be confused in writing this on your own, you can just add a dot above it and it will help. And then the lowercase t, you will probably realize is very similar to your standard ordinary everyday t's. So we're going to start up and then start down below, go up and then curve off to the side. And then near the top, I'm just going to do a straight line right across. You recognize it. It's awesome. It is your average everyday T. And congratulations, you have made it to the last line of letters. So the U is actually fairly easy. We're going to start at this little curl, and then we're going to go up and around. So curl, swoop up, down, and around. And then now that we have our nice little curl, we're going to go straight down and hook off to the side for the second part of the letter. Okay, and that is our basic U. Our lowercase u is also like a very standard cursive U, where we're going to have the hook on the top as we curve down in the bulb of the letter. And then we are going to just have our straight line and hook off to the side. So we can have our U. Nice and easy. And the V looks like it should be complicated, but the V is not actually complicated. The V it's very graceful and it's very elegant, and it's not even trying really. So we are going to start with this line, and we are just going to do from the right down and with a very slight curve ending in a point. Point is actually important for this. So it's a little bit of a curving line, but it's not an extremely curving line. And the V is also fashionable, so it has a feather as well. So we're just going to start at the top, and we are going to curl up the feather for the V. And then the second part of the line, we're going to start up at the top of it, and then we are going to go diagonally down to connect to that first part of the line. But you want a certain amount of distance, so I'm going to go all the way over here and then down and link them. And it's very doable. And then the lowercase v, we are going to have that same hook and a slight curve downward. And then you can curve up, or, yeah. Then, because we're not doing that, go up and hook off to the side. And that is your V. And the W is very similar to the V, except it suffers the same sort of thing that the M and the N do, where distance between the strokes actually seems to matter. And it doesn't look right if you get too little or too much. But don't let that intimidate you, because it is a letter and you can do it. So we are going to start with actually roughly the same line that we did for the V. So you're going to do a curving line starting down, going down, and ending off further away. And then the W is also fashionable, so it also gets a feather atop its first line. And then we are going to, in the middle of it, like a little bit of a distance away, in the upper middle part of the letter, roughly, we're going to go down and we are going to make a similar line where it just connects. Then we are going to ignore this line again for a moment because we're going to connect it. So we are going to go all the way over here and we're going to do this line and curl and go down to a point roughly equivalent over there to our first line. So curl, curving line down, and there. And I went too far down, but that's okay. And then from this line, we are going to make a curl down to connect to that third line that we have drawn. And that is our W. The lowercase w is also fairly standard calligraphy fare, where we have our connecting hook and we go down and then we go down again. So it is very recognizable as a lowercase w, and if you wanted to connect it to something, I'll say, I'll write out own. You would just have an extra little loop at the top to connect it, and you would be set. All right, grab another sip of liquid. It is just coffee, I promise. Then we are going to move on to the X, which is very pretty and rather sadly is not going to feature in too many capitals. So we are going to start with this line, and we are going to do our little curl, loop up, and swirl down and end in that curve. So curl, loop, and then up again. So just cute little thing. And then we are going to go in a curve from the top, just down, and we are going to hook it. So very piratey, very, very fancy X. And then the lowercase x is somehow even fancier than the uppercase X, where we are going to have a cute little curl and then loop down and then up in a curve. So curl, straight line down and up in a curve, or up in a hook rather. And then we're going to do roughly the same thing we did for the uppercase X on the lowercase, where we have a little hook and we go down and we curl. And that's it. That is the X. Nice and simple. I cannot win with my headphone cord. It's okay. Just going to move that over there. And the Y, we are almost done. You have almost made it. The Y is actually very similar to the U, that same first line. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did for the U. We're going to curl and go up and then down. So curl, swerving, and then around. So as you can see, very similar to what we did with the U. And instead of the difference between the U and the Y is one, this is slightly smaller than what we did for the U because it's not taking up the entire like line that we would be doing if we were actually using lined paper. Instead of going straight down and hooking, we are going to use that same line that we did for the A and almost all of the other letters, except we're going to make it a lot bigger. So we are going to have it go and get the right edge of the pen, curving under the letter to have its final curl. So the Y is a bigger letter, but you're probably used to that as well. So just up, curl down, and then end in the curve. And then the lowercase y is also very recognizable as a cursive Y, where we're going to start with our connecting letter or connecting line and dipping down in that comfortable U. And then from the top, we are going to do a vaguely curving line downward, and we are going to loop up for our connecting line for the end of the Y. And then for the trickiest, well, not the trickiest, but the one that looks like it is just as confusing as the F, we have come to our final letter, which is the Z. Now, I'm sure that you're not going to have to do too many uppercase Z's for the most part, unless your name starts with a Z, in which case you're going to have lots of fun doing the uppercase Z. But it's not as bad as it looks, I promise. So we are going to start with this curl. So start with the curl and then go up and down and diagonally down. So it's almost like the L, except sort of oppositely looped. And if you've done other calligraphy, you will recognize that sort of come on, that kind of line where it's a bit curvy, and it's a very similar thing with this Z, but one way or the other. We are going to do our curl, and then we are going to loop up, down into an actual loop, and then diagonally down into a line. So this is the first part of our letter. And as you can see, it's a little finicky, but it could be much worse. And then our second part of the letter, we are going to, from the base of this line that we have just drawn, we are going to loop up and then create an actual curl and loop around. So up, down into a curl, and then trailing off to the side in like that lovely little flourish that we have grown to expect from this script. And then the last line with the Z is a little hook and then straight across. So hook and then, well, not straight, but like curvingly across the center of the letter. But nice and easier than you thought it probably was going to be, hopefully, when you first caught sight of the letter and were like, what is that supposed to be? And then the lowercase c, again, if you are familiar with cursive, this is what the lowercase c looks like. And it is fairly standard. So you're going to, it's like a 3 with an extra flourish that has managed to disguise itself as a letter, to be very fair. So we're going to go up a little bit and then down. And then we are going to do our loop off to the side. And that is our Z, where it is legitimately like a 3 with an extra curl on it. And that, my friends, is Copperplate. You have managed to survive my Copperplate lesson on how to do this very, very fancy script. But I also had questions at one point on how the letters would actually link. So, like, for instance, if I was going to write it out, like using a lot of capitals, because it seems a shame not to use a lot of capitals when we've just learned them and they are ever so fancy. There is a sentence that actually uses every single letter of the alphabet, which is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. So checking my letter. Okay. But you will see the letters do connect, and they connect fairly smoothly. Not going to write out the entire sentence. But you can definitely see how the letters connect so that you can actually write. And I mean, I am doing this backwards and upside down, so this is not the easiest time writing for me, but if you actually wanted to practice the script, you could go super smoothly and actually write as though you were just normally writing. It would be very easy. And I mean, you can understand why such things had become standard and how effective it actually apparently is, since we are still using traces of it today. But that is basically my lesson on copperplate, and I hope you enjoyed it and will continue to practice it. Until next time, I will see you then.